Hi, I'm Jason Inman, and if you're watching this video, then that assumes that you have pre-ordered my book, Super Soldiers, A Salute to the Comic Book Heroes and Villains Who Fought for Their Country. And first off, thank you. Thank you for believing in me, and thank you for buying my words on parchment, because that means a lot to me, and I love you. Straight up, I love you. Just that you need to know that. So, I have some of my research right here that's talking about my writing process from the book and some of the characters that I decided to cut out of the book that you won't read. So, if you pre-order the book, you gave me that thing, you've already got the first 3 chapters, so you've checked some of that stuff out, and I hope you like them. And again, thank you for pre-ordering the book. So, when I was writing this book, first off, I had to decide some of the heroes that needed to be included, some of the villains that needed to be included, and also some of the problems that needed to be included. And I'll give you an example of the problem characters. I basically had to make my list of characters that I wanted to include in this book. Now, I define problems as basically characters that are problematic to the military. Even if they're not a villain, they're problematic to their stories, maybe because of PTSD, maybe because of trauma. The Punisher is an example of those characters. So I made my giant list of my characters that were going to be included in the book, and then from there, I kind of moved them around depending on DC and Marvel, and I moved them around depending on whether some of their stories were too similar to other characters, which is the biggest reason why I cut out some of the characters in the books. Some of the characters that did make in this book, of course, Captain America had to be in this book no matter what. There was no way you can write a book about the military and superheroes and not include Captain America in this. Same for Captain Marvel. I'm talking about the Carol Danvers because she was an Air Force colonel. She's a huge MCU star, but not only that, she's very progressive and very... I needed a strong female character in this book, basically to represent all the amazing female service members out there. I put some dark horses in there, like Gravedigger, which is a character that I don't think many people know, that is from DC Comics' Our Army at War. He's a character that appeared throughout about 22 issues, I think, 18 to 22 issues in there. Very fascinating character. That chapter actually is one of my favorite chapters in the entire book. Of course, Punisher's in there, John Stewart's in there, Hal Jordan's in there, very luminary Sergeant Rock is in there. But let me talk to you about some of the characters that I really, really had to struggle to keep in the book, and then eventually I decided to cut them out. The first one is Eddie the Comedian Blake from Watchmen, from 1985's Watchmen. Now, he's very representational in that story of the Vietnam War, of the trouble and basically the moral decrepitude of the U.S. Army and all their service members in Vietnam and how they behaved. Now, that's not the reason why I decided to not include him in the book. I basically couldn't find a good way inside of his character to talk about him. I couldn't find a way inside that could examine that character that I wasn't doing with other characters, so he had to go. And plus, him only basically being in 12 issues plus one other miniseries really kind of nixed him out. I chose a lot of characters that were featured in a lot of stuff because that way, with the depth of material, I could really focus on the story, focus on the character, and get a lot of information. I had to cut the losers, and that was one of the most painful cuts in the entire book. I really desperately wanted to include the losers in this, but eventually talking about a team of almost characters, archetypes, was less powerful than actually focusing down on one singular person. I had to cut the Unknown Soldier, which is another Vertigo character that I desperately wanted to include in this. But again, when I backed up and looked at him, there's not much depth to the Unknown Soldier compared to other characters like, say, Flash Thompson from Spider-Man, who is also, if you didn't know, a long-standing service member. Willie Schultz is another comic book character that I desperately wanted to include. He's not very well known in many comic book circles, but it's the idea that he's an American-German citizen, and he goes over to World War II and eventually gets stuck behind enemy lines, and then he fakes that he's a Nazi to kind of survive the war. It's a very interesting comic book story. Go Google him if you don't know about him. But at the end of the day, just couldn't make some room into him. U.S. Agent was another one. The G.I. Joes were another one. But there was a whole bunch of characters that eventually I had to knock out, like Joshua Tempest Clay of the Doom Patrol, because he served in Vietnam. He was one that I had to boot out. Even there was even some brief time where I thought about talking about Reed Richards and Benjamin J. Grimm, because they both originally served in World War II, and I had to nix them out. So there's some ideas, there's some thought process behind my book, Super Soldiers. Again, thank you so much for pre-ordering this book. I hope this video gave you some idea, gave you some excitement, gave you some juice towards the book that's coming out very soon, June 15th. Be on the lookout. I will be doing some signings around the California area. So you live in California, I'm going to be doing a couple of signings. So if you pre-order this book and you didn't pre-order the ebook, well, you know what, this still applies for you. I will be doing some signings. I'll be more than happy to sign your book. Check it out. And if you bought it through Kindle or an ebook reader, please bring your iPad with a giant Sharpie. I will sign the screen of your iPad. I kid. I'll just do a giant handprint in acrylic paint to, right atop your iPad. But again, thank you so much for pre-ordering my book. I hope you enjoy it. Your support of independent books is the reason why books get made, and you're helping me on the next step to write the next book, because I do have some more plans for some other books. I got lots of them. They're up in there. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the pre-order. I'm Jason Inman, and be seeing you, friends.